Hi, Allie.
Yay! Hi, Deborah. How are you?
I think before we begin, I want to show everyone something. I'm going to unplug my computer.
Okay.
Um, pay no heed to the messy room, but look at this right here. Oh, let's see if we can get a good shot of it.
Oh, yeah. Look
Remember
at
that?
them. The coolest women on the planet. Look at those two. Unreal.
So
Look
that
at them.
is me and my daughter, shot
Yeah.
by photographer, I thought, Allie Smith. I got to plug my computer back in. I had no idea your skills as a bassist, and then I actually looked you up on YouTube, and you can play drums and sing and so many
Uh,
other things. I was just like, oh, Allie Smith, the photographer. Okay, let's get to the heart of the matter. I'm interviewing Allie not about her photography, but about this incredibly beautiful memoir that came to my doorstep, and I was like, wait, what? Allie's a writer too? I mean, not just a writer, but an incredibly beautiful writer. And this is a book about it's a memoir of your time in a punk band that played at CBGB's. I can practically smell the beer on the floor. Called
mm.
Speedball Baby, and it's called The Ballad of Speedball Baby by Allie Smith. And let me just read Allie's um, bio here. It says Allie Smith is an award-winning photographer and writer whose work is regularly featured in The Guardian, The New York Times, and many more publications internationally. Her book, Mama Love, How the Mother Half Lives, which I was in with Leo,
Hmm.
won two international book awards and was praised for the New York by the New York Times and Gloria Steinem. Love Gloria. Allie has taught, lectured, and exhibited at the International Center of Photography, NYU, and several galleries and institutions worldwide. A passion for telling women's stories, Allie forged her vibrant artistic style in New York's underground music scene, where she played bass in the seminal punk blues avant-garde band Speedball Baby. Learn more at alliesmith.com.
Thank you
Well,
very much.
by the way, there is another novelist named Allie Smith. What is her website? Is it like
I don't know. Let's hope it's not AllieSmith.com
yeah.
because we
Yeah.
already have enough confusion. I get a lot of invitations to lecture at Cambridge, and
Uh-huh. Got it.
I'm gonna throw it out there. They're not for me.
Got it.
But
Yeah, it's going to be
yeah,
very confusing. That's going to be very confusing.
that's
You
all
might
right.
want to write about that in your bio or something like that. All right, let's talk. Before we talk about the book, and I actually want you to read a section from it, not right now, but I want you to
Yeah,
read a section. Um, just tell me, because I've read the book, but readers haven't. Tell me
yeah.
how you got into the punk rock scene in New York City in the 90s.
Right. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for all that. It's always so much nicer when somebody else talks about achievements because it sounds nice. I also want to say that I do look like I'm in the middle of a David Lynch film. I understand that's a little strange. If you knew my living situation right now, you'd understand. But yes, so I've actually moved to the UK. So this finishing this book and putting it out now and going back to this time in New York, which was so important to me and so many other people, has been sort of layers on layers of exploration, because I'm trying to see who I am now outside of New York for the first time in my life. I've only ever lived in New York. So I was born and raised in New York, and sort of with like lots of people, with the implosion of my nuclear family and the disillusionment of perfection in that area of my life. I sort of forged out in the world and tried to find a new family. And I think, a lot of us that were maybe sensitive and artistically inclined and whatever, we came from all around the world to New York, to the underground music scene and sort of found each other and tried to make something that made more sense to us and felt meaningful. So I, was going to CBGB's hardcore matinees when I was 16.
Wow.
And that was a real way to sort of get thrown in there and, figure out who you are and if you can survive. And I had moved out really young with my punk boyfriend, and that was a great decision. And I mean, it is now because I look back and I'm like, oh, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
That was really hard. But so I just sort of like found my people in that world. It was a really exciting time in the 90s. You could really, in the Lower East Side, you could really live below the radar. Like, if you were up for it, you just sort of got to sort of, if you moved to neighborhoods where like the police sort of let it police itself in a way, it was freedom. It was a road to freedom. You lived alongside creativity and every ethnicity and every lifestyle, and you learned how to be a person in the world, not just your world, but the world of people coming together. And yeah.
And when did you first move to the East Village out of your parents' home?
Right. Well, when I was 16, I moved my high school boyfriend into my mom's apartment. We were living on Fordham Road in the Bronx.
Right.
And that was like not very generous of me, but it made sense at the time. And she allowed it to happen until she didn't. And we were horrible to have around. And she finally just said, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to do it on your own. And I was like, okay.
Mhm.
I don't think that was the reaction she wanted, but then we moved to Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn
Mhm.
and around Pratt Institute and met other punks and artists there. And then like finally clawed, that became a quite problematic abusive relationship. And so I was desperate to get out of it, but I sort of like did that by crawling my way to the Lower East Side of Manhattan and getting an apartment with 7 people who hated him, and like, so like,
It's all really fascinating for me. We don't know each other well, but I know you well enough that
yeah.
I've had you for dinner with Joshua, your husband.
Hmm.
And when I look at sort of the picture perfect marriage you guys have, and it's a beautiful marriage, it's very, very loving, and you have
It
this
is.
wonderful son. It's almost like the two people that are the Allie from back then and the Allie from now are so different to me. And yet I see the
Mm.
thread. I see the thread, and the thread to me is art. And that thread has followed you
Mm.
through to now. So, punk rock scene. And then how did you sort of transition from punk rock bass playing? And by the way, the only woman in most of these
Yeah.
bands,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
As far as the eye could see. How
Yeah.
did you transition from punk rock bass playing to photography? Was that a fast transition? Was it happening as you were playing?
Well, I was always taking photos. My mom was a nurse at NYU Hospital. So
Mhm.
she kept begging me to go to NYU. And I was like, I've got a life in progress. I don't, like I already know what I'm doing. I'm living on the Lower East Side and playing music, or whatever I was doing. And she's like, just please, I just really want to quit this job. Like after a while, I had all this other stuff going on, but I still always kind of had, whether it was just like the fear of dying poor someday or just like this drive that I always had, I kind of wanted to keep moving. I never wanted to stay stuck in any one place. So I did end up going to NYU, and I kept quitting to go on tour or quitting to do this and that. And I finally finished, and I discovered that of all the arts, photography spoke to me and also sort of folded into what I was doing. I started taking pictures of bands. They were using them on their album covers. I took pictures of, the dire situations around me, which was very interesting, and so it sort of melded with my life really well. And then when we were touring a lot, and when I was finally in Speedball Baby and we were touring a lot, and it was a very male centric world, um, I was just getting really fed up. I was sort of like feeling very alone in the way that I looked at the world. And I needed to connect to other people, other women that also felt like I did. So I started reaching out to people that had inspired me, and like Janine Garofalo, Lydia Lunch, Ann Magnuson, Alice Walker, all these women who had sort of lived lives that were off the beaten path, but they made these great careers just being themselves. And that's what I wanted confirmation that you could do. So I sought them out and started doing portraits of them. And that led to my book, Laws of the Bandit Queens.
Mhm.
And that was sort of like a big opening for me. You know what I mean? Like, 35 women I admired told me, yeah, you can do it. Be yourself. You don't have to go this road. And it just sort of cracked me open a little bit more, so then photography became more how I told my stories.
And I think I met you right after that. You found me through Shutter Babe or something like that. Like
Yeah, Shutter Babe.
yeah, you reached out because of Shutter Babe. And
Yeah.
then I remember at the time I had two tiny little kids, and you had
Yeah.
Solvig, right? Was her name Solvig?
Yeah, Solveig. Yeah, my stepdaughter.
Older teenager. And I was like, wow, this woman is so cool with her pink hair and her child, a teen child or older tween at the time.
Yeah.
That was your then husband's or partner's daughter, right?
Yeah, that's right. My then partner's daughter. Yeah, who's just had a baby. So,
No.
hey.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need to interrupt you for 1 second because
Sure.
I'm in England, it's freezing, and that heater is going to make me
Go, go,
pass
go, go.
out. So hold on one
Go,
second.
go. And while you're doing that, I'm going to say this book, The Ballad of Speedball Baby, which is coming out this month. So I started reading it on a plane and I had so much work to do and I was just like inhaling. Actually, here's what I'd like you to do because, I've
Yeah.
read memoirs of artists, of musicians, and they're good. This rises above the noise of that. And I want to have you read, it's in the part 250. It starts with, I wish that I bled when I was lonely. If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, yeah. Be my pleasure.
And I'll print it in the piece.
Brilliant. I wish that I bled when I was lonely. When there's blood, someone is bound to yell, "Stop the bleeding!" Or, "If you're bleeding, there's a problem." But some of the things that have ever left me feeling the loneliest didn't involve any blood. There wasn't even any blood when Colton and I decided to burn each other's initials into each other's forearms as a sign of our unrelenting forever love. Just the smell of pork frying through the whiskey-induced haze and the white bald scar still there where no hair will grow. But no sense of belonging to or with somebody, no sense of love. There was never any blood when my parents, living together mostly in silence, broken by intermittent jabs at each other, finally separated. And none when I moved Colton into my mom's apartment like a whipped dog I'd found in an alley. If there had ever been any blood, someone may have known the extent of the problem. Someone may have stepped in to help.
So beautiful. It's so beautiful.
No, thank you.
Really is lovely. I want you to tell me because my audience is a lot of middle-aged women. I think we have like a quarter men, but like mostly middle-aged women. And a
Mhm.
lot of them do write into me and say, I want to write a book. How do I do that? I mean, you decided at age, I don't know, what are you in your 40s now or
I'm 54 now.
you're 54 now? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
54 or but
yeah.
earlier because you're now 50.
Yeah, a few years ago.
Um, as I understand it,
Mhm.
our mutual friend Miriam Shore, who worked on
Yeah.
Younger with me,
Mhm.
so Miriam said to you, you need to write a memoir, and then
Mhm.
you just wrote it at 50. How old were you when you started?
Probably late 40s at that point. It took a while. Yeah.
You started writing this memoir, you finished it, you found an agent, a publisher. What would you say to any woman listening to
Mm,
this who is our age and who has a story to tell?
okay.
You're
First of all, when you put it in a line, like a straight line, it all sounds like it worked out real well. You know what I mean? And it did work out well because there's a book, but it was not a straight line. Like Miriam and I are really good buddies. And she and I used to talk about New York in the 90s, and we've both been through it. And she was in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So she was in that world, and it was all very gritty. And we used to laugh, and like she'd laugh at these stories, and we'd cry. Like we ran the gamut of emotions. And she said, "You have to write it down." And then like, I was like, eh. And then like, I don't know, a month later, we went to get a pedicure, and I was like, boom. And I put down this big paper, and she started crying. I was like, "You told
wow.
me to write it down." And it really was, it wasn't really that she told me, but it was that she was confirming for me that we had been through something. And
Right.
it wasn't just me talking about like this, that random thing. And that it was a thing that so many people had experienced their version of. So there's that. And then, also there are all these other stories now. Like you've got Michaela Cole and Phoebe Waller-Bridge on the mic. You've got Sex Education, where there are storylines about young women being assaulted on a bus, spoiler alert, and then speaking about it, and the community of receptivity and the community of support, which when we were all going through our versions of that very thing, didn't exist as far as I know. I mean, I hope it did for somebody, but I don't know to the extent to it that it really does now, but I think it's much more, it's much better.
Well, I have to
So,
say, like when I wrote about being assaulted in Shutter Babe,
yeah.
I was two female writers accused me of bringing it on myself. Almost
Okay.
backwards, writers
Okay.
that reviewed the book. So I
Okay.
think what was going on back then is we were all tools of the patriarchy. I mean, all the women would toe the patriarchal line, and it took until 2017, until Me Too, for people to say, "Hey,
Hmm.
it's not okay." Um, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, may I say to that, sorry, I don't want to
Oh, no,
interrupt
no,
you
it's okay.
because you're absolutely right. But it's exciting to hear you say that only because how true is that? That is the nature of, that is the nature of the patriarchy, of capitalism, the idea of scarcity. In music in the 90s, they were saying, oh, labels would say, we already have a woman on the label.
Yeah.
We don't need another, or we already have a woman on bass, or whatever number of nonsense that they were going to throw at you. And, it was also very compartmentalized in the music scene. There was Riot Girl, and I'm so glad that existed, but it wasn't where I felt like myself, you
Mhm.
know. Um, there were other groups of like there was the Lunatics, L7, all these really fantastic women just subverting every expectation of them.
Right. And
But I didn't
whole as well. Yes.
for sure, but Hole, yes, definitely. Hole was a little bit, yes, Hole became a whole other thing. They were great. But what I mean to say is, even in the context of pushing back and refusing to be shamed, refusing to be sexualized voyeuristically, and taking back that power, there was still a sense of scarcity. It was like division, like elbows, like we're over here and we're over here, and that's the nature of scarcity. It creates competition amongst people who should be unified, right? So when those people are talking about you in that way, it's the most disappointing version of that, right?
It's
Like
so
you
much more.
hate the game, but you don't want to lose it. Yeah.
It's so much more disappointing than if a man says it. A man says it, you're like, well, that's what I've heard all my life. But when women take down other women, it is the thing. Who was it? I forget. There's a famous politician who said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women, and who was,
Right.
I don't remember.
That's my new favorite person. I
Yes.
mean, I am shocked, to be honest, at how I had to defend myself using the word feminist, which I always have. I never, I didn't buy into the co-opting of it to divide, and like, uh, I was unapologetic, but I was completely isolated, I think. I had to explain that away to a lot of women that I knew who were living as feminists, who were not living in shame, who were having whatever adventures they wanted to have. But it was an interesting thing. It felt like it had really worked where they took that word and used it again, made it,
Hate it there. Yeah, yeah.
a weapon. But
So
in terms of right, oh, sorry.
no, no. So yeah, in terms of writing, like
Yeah,
how did you just sit down and do it? I mean, how?
I did. I did just sit down and do it. And it took many revisions because the first ones were like diaries, and I just had to burn off all the and then I felt like this, and I had to burn it off. And I asked a lot of people to read it, and a lot of people were super generous with their time, like Miriam, who read it, I think, 4 times before it was even like
Wait, I've lost you for a
a
second.
love.
Wait, I lost you for a
Oh,
second.
sorry.
You said like
Oh,
Miriam. Yeah.
who I think read it 4 times. Miriam, I showed it to Miriam. She read it, I think, 4 times, before it was even like a very good version.
Okay.
So a lot of generosity came my way. And I think you would find that when you are doing your project, that people want to help for the most part. And Then I went to my agent, Jill Grinberg, who's a wonderful agent and a wonderful woman. We're totally on the same page. She could not sell the book.
Mhm.
It is very hard, as you particularly well know, to keep your chutzpah up, your self-confidence, your belief, all of it is so hard during this process because it will just tear you down. And it was just no, no, no. And it was the worst kind of no was that we love the writing. This was sort of the biggest response from the big five that we got. And to be fair, we showed them an earlier version and it wasn't as good as this, wasn't as tight. We love the writing. Who the hell is she? She's not famous, we can't sell it. And I was so unimaginative and boring. And that was really, really insulting, actually. I was like, I don't know. I guess it's not enough to be like a person with a lived experience. I don't know what to tell you. If you're that unimaginative,
Well, unfortunately, the publishing industry is becoming more and more and more like that. You have to have a following, you have to be famous, you have to, be Kendall Jenner, one of the Kardashians. You have to, um, they want you to sell 1 million copies. There's not a lot of support these days. And as the publishing houses eat each other up and it becomes just five now, there's just not a lot of room for voices of the average person. But you're not even average. You were in a punk band that played at CBGB's and toured all over the world. And I read this and I think to myself, like, why don't I know about this band? And then I looked you up online and I looked up some of the videos. I'm like, this is an amazing music. I'm going to put some of the music in the Substack, but
cool.
This music. Talk to me for a moment, because you talk about it a little bit in the book, about the economics of touring as a band.
Right. Well, I wonder if it's changed, but I doubt it has that much, I mean, in the 90s, if you had any desire to quote unquote make it or make money at music, you would never say it, even to yourself. You would keep that shit to yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to be important. I wanted to be meaningful and a legend and Debbie Harry and all this stuff. But I mean, like, it was anathema to the whole punk ethos and everything. But for some reason, we were still trying to get like record deals. We wanted our music out there. We wanted to complete the cycle of creativity. So basically, you mostly pay a lot of money out to drive yourself to shows wherever you can, and like walk away with a little bit of money. That feels like a huge accomplishment. I guess in your 20s it is. You're going to go back to your bartending job and you're like, hey, $50, that's amazing, which is maybe as it should be, because I've had these conversations lately with people who are like, it's terrible that young people can't make any money on music right now because of the streaming system. I'm like, maybe. Okay. I mean, but I just don't know, because we were horribly abused. I think we still owe MCA Records, who is the major label that signed us. I think we still technically owe them, like, I don't know, $1 million or something that nobody would ever, I don't know.
Oh
But, you just tour is what you used to do. I don't, it's probably online now. It's probably a little bit different, but the mechanism of it is the same. You just work a lot to try to get your stuff out there,
I think Matt is going to have to find more Basquiat's on the street.
Yeah. I think those days are over, my love.
There's a part in this book, I'm just going to ruin it. It's just so great, where your bandmate finds just like Basquiat's thrown out in the street, like a few weeks after Basquiat actually died by his own hand. And it paid for his studio and, guitars. And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wonder, is that a spoiler? That's all right. It's all good. But I saw those Basquiat's. I saw one of them. And like, it's interesting because yes, it paid all that stuff. It did enable us to exist. It did enable his career to grow and all this. But really, like, I saw that one of those Basquiat's, and to me, I think that was a lot of what we were all feeling at the time, the value of things like that. It wasn't just that it did that. It did that for sure. And that was fantastic. That felt like getting over on the man. That felt like a sideways, side entrance into something that was closed off to most of us. But the value of things, like there's the mark on the paper, or here's the studio you built on the Lower East Side. It was just like everything had a lot of sort of integral value to it, which was very exciting. You know what I mean?
And especially that you were living there at that time. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that's unrelated to the book, and that'll be our last question. But you moved to London.
I did.
Can you tell me a little bit about that life choice? Because a lot of us in the United States right now, particularly as the leading up to this election, and the risk of Trump getting to be president again is large. A
Yeah.
lot of us are like, so where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? I mean, luckily you have
Right.
Joshua, who's a British citizen, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So barring marrying somebody who's British or
I advise it. I
I
mean,
know. Just tell me a little bit about the move and your life.
Yeah.
And this is just me dead interested in Allie's life right now.
Sure, sure, sure. So, all the big feels like you're having. Like 2016, I was at the Jacob Javits Convention Center photographing for the Guardian newspaper Hillary Clinton's victory party. And that shit turned to a mass funeral real quick. And the like it was like a death. It was and it didn't change for years afterwards, right? So, that was real. And then living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan now with my kid post pandemic, it
Yeah.
was like an explosion of violence and people just left to their own devices, no social services, like the 90s, but I've changed and I do think it was a bit more dire because like the payoff was not very good, you know, like you have some friends who didn't move out of the city, but it's hard every day and there's a lot of stuff, violence going on around you. I, got hit on the street several times for the first time in my life. I've managed not to have that happen for decades. So it just felt like a boot in the ass of something that I was already feeling negative about because of the politics. And so Joshua's from England, and when you're a native New Yorker, you think that's the only place you could possibly live because everybody there tells you that's the only place you could possibly live. And I was dug in for a long time, and I just finally it switched. The switch went off, and I was like, "We got to go. We got to go." And I did feel a little bit like, when do you know it's time to go before everything gets too bad? Maybe I'm being dramatic, but that's how I felt.
A lot of people feel
And yeah, so we did, and I'm just writing about it for the Observer. Actually, that's New York to. I actually live in Norwich. I don't live in London. It's an hour and a half outside of London, and it's a really artistic, really vibrant city. It's fantastic. I've
yeah.
had a great experience. Like it's been hard as hell, real hard, but I'm so glad I did it. So.
How old is your son and what is the schooling system like there for him?
Right. So he's just turned 14. I know, we took him from progressive public schools on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where they were like, the whole school was going out for the climate march, and we're like, oh my God, he's going to be wearing a because they're still really into like Harry Potter houses in schools, and then they have their uniforms and everything. He's like, this is going to be the death of him. And, take away from all his friends and do that. We couldn't do it. So we actually found a little Steiner school, which
Oh,
in New York is 40 grand a year, but in Norwich is 7 grand a year. So he's in a Steiner school. And I got to say, I think it's one of the best things that ever happened to him. He's
that's
so,
so great. That's
yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Is it a cult? I don't know. They're knitting, like he knits a sock. I'm like, I guess that's education. No, but I do absolutely believe in it. I'm
So
kidding.
I know a lot of young adults now who went to Steiner schools who are
Yeah.
awesome, just awesome people. And well, I don't really have any more questions about the book. I just
Yeah.
really want people to read this. When is the pub date?
Tuesday, January 16th.
Okay, so I got to get this out this
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll get it out right afterwards. But anyway,
Awesome.
I'm really proud of you, first of all. I've known you, I don't know how long, since
Aw.
2001, 2-ish or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
no, I think
Yeah.
I met you I think it was pre 9/11. I think I got an email from you right after Shutter Babe came out. So it's now like over 20 years.
Well,
And
when was Leah born?
Leah was born 2006. We
Okay.
met before that. We met way
We
before.
had, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
That's how I
I
met
think you're
Soul
right.
Day and all that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
like, if you look at any of my videos from Substack, like that photo is always there. It's my favorite photo of me and my daughter. It will go wherever I go. It is part of our family and part of our life. And thank you for your art in all of its forms.
Well, same back to you, my friend. I mean, let's face it. You've been doing all this stuff too and doing it amazingly. And you've jumped through, you've been creative in all these different ways as well. And I love what you do and I love you for it. You know, you give so much. You're ballsy chick.
All right, thank you. We're gonna press pause. Stay on the
All
line.
right.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
Bye.
Wait, I gotta press stop. I can never do this. All right.